This is DBrief, brought to you by the Australian Industry Group.
Hello, and welcome to this series of special episodes of AR Group's DBrief podcast. My name's Louise McGrath. I'm Head of Industry Development and Policy at the Australian Industry Group. DBrief is designed to give you insights into the impact of policy on your business. In these mini episodes, we'll be talking about the kinds of policies we want to see for members in the upcoming federal election. Today I have Tennant Reid, AR Group's Director for Climate and Energy, giving a rundown of his pre-election policy paper. Hello, Tennant.
G'day, Louise. Good to be with you.
So, give us a rundown first off with the problem we're trying to solve.
So there's a few problems that we face. One is around the provision of adequate, reliable, affordable and clean energy to the Australian economy and the many industries that use it in different ways. We had a cost advantage in geographically isolated and abundant reserves of fossil energy, but those resources are all tightly linked to global export markets now, and the cost advantage has disappeared. On the reliability front, on electricity generation, our coal-fired fleet is getting ever older and does need to be replaced. And of course, the emissions from those generators are quite high, and emissions from the use of coal and gas for other purposes, for industrial process heat, and in some cases for feedstock for industrial use, those are also significant. Then we have the challenge of how are we going to meet our national ambitions for deep decarbonisation over the next few decades. There's a bipartisan commitment to net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest, and there's a lot that's bound up in achieving that. We've had a lot of conversation about electricity generation, but beyond 2030 or so, really we will have topped out what just reducing emissions from the electricity sector itself can deliver towards these national goals. And so what can we responsibly and competitively do in industry, in transport, in agriculture, in resources? Those are going to become more and more relevant problems for whoever forms the next government.
And just to give listeners a bit of context, I'm going to quote from a research note that the economics and research team will be publishing and putting on our website. So in terms of who uses energy in Australia, half of it goes into industrial sectors who also use the bulk of the gas.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a bit of a challenge for some time.
Energy is used in different ways with different intensities by different pieces of industry. There are a lot of parts of the manufacturing sector that are not nearly as energy intensive as those who are making quote unquote basic materials like aluminium, like iron and steel, like cement and concrete, and like the chemicals sector, which makes essential products like ammonia for fertilizer and explosives. That subset of heavier industries accounts for a huge share of that 50%. And so for those businesses, the price of energy is life or death. For everybody else, it's important, but it's most important as the provider of business continuity. Can you do business at all with the electricity and the gas or other heat resource that's available to you?
And I guess companies, as they try to decarbonise, regardless of what their fuel source is, have two options. One is to improve efficiency, and the other potentially is to electrify if they can access renewable electrification.
Yeah, so electrification is super relevant to a lot of businesses. There are alternatives, and so biomethane is essentially the same molecule as what's in natural gas. It's just that it comes from a sustainable, renewable, biological source rather than from a sustainable, renewable biological source of 100 million years ago. And that could be very useful for some businesses because you don't need to change anything at your end necessarily to adopt it. If somebody will pipe it to you, then you can do exactly what you're doing now, but with much, much lower emissions. That's not going to be an option available or preferable for everyone because there's a cost premium to biomethane, and it's a significant one. It's not infinite, but it does look large. And because there may be limits on how much biomethane can actually be produced and supplied, given all the other calls on the waste and other biomass that is used to make it. Hydrogen, also potentially a solution for some businesses. There's a bit of a winter for hydrogen hopes at the moment. Some hydrogen stuff will happen, but it's not going to be the be-all, end-all solution for all things that some people hoped it would be 5 years ago. So that does, you're right, leave electrification as a significant option for many businesses, especially for low-grade process heat and for transport. I've been speaking recently with an AI Group member in the logistics business who is working with a number of their major customers to start using battery electric heavy trucks in many contexts, whether that's in resources, in delivery of large quantities of heavy cargo. And there's a lot of complications that come with being the pioneer for that within Australia, all manner of procedures that need to be adapted, safety regulations, education of staff, deals with landlords. Like, there's a lot of logistics involved there. It's going to come, though, and that electric option is going to be quite relevant. But how is it adoptable for more businesses is where one of the challenges for the next government comes in on the policies to deliver all this.
And what are those policies that we'd like to see tended to get to move the dial on this?
So we've broken out the recommendations for the next government into 4 broad categories. One is just about the credibility and reliability and investability of climate and energy policy overall. We have seen in the past couple of decades a lot of instances of massive chopping and changing in this space from one government to the next. And of course, every new government is going to want to put its stamp on policy, put its particular priorities forward, and to correct what they see as the errors of their predecessors. But we do need a continuing thread of policies if businesses are going to invest on the basis of those policies. And so we're calling broadly for evolution, not revolution, in this space from the next government, including because we've seen again and again that wholly new policy initiatives tend to take a lot longer to develop and to bed down than their framers imagine at the outset. So building on things like the safeguard mechanism, building on the integrated system plan for the electricity sector, the capacity investment scheme, which is encouraging investment in the electricity sector. These are all important things to work with rather than try and come up with a blank sheet of paper.
And we can see the impact of that. People perhaps might think of sort of the big consequences of policy uncertainty, but there's a lot of micro decisions that don't get made at an enterprise level. When we surveyed our members last year on technology investment, that was the big call out, that policy uncertainty has really inhibited investment in net zero technology, which might explain why some of the electrification rates are very flat. And in some industries, there's been some, about 17% saving in efficiency, but that's not really large enough to get to where we need to go, is that?
Yeah, that's right. To get to net zero emissions, not every sector can or will get to absolute zero emissions, but you'd need to achieve very deep reductions. And there are a few ways broadly to go about that. One is to use energy of whatever sort more efficiently. Another is to change the source of the energy that you're using. Things get really interesting and contradictory once we are in a world of very, very abundant but intermittent solar and wind power, where, especially on the solar front, it might start making sense to use energy a bit less efficiently if you can time it for when we've got solar power coming out of our ears. And so low capital investment, low energy efficiency, but highly controllable processes might start to be something that is relevant to these very energy intensive industries. Whereas if you're running a data center, if you are running a parts manufacturer, what's important to you is uptime. Energy is just one of the inputs to you. You want to be meeting your customers' needs whenever you've got customers. So, what should we be doing then in the industry space? There's a few things that are relevant. So, I mentioned the safeguard mechanism. This is a legacy policy that started in the Abbott government. It has been built on by the Albanese government. It obliges very large facilities to either reduce their on-site emissions or emissions intensity, or to acquire emissions reductions from others. And it gets tighter and tighter over time. It is a big deal of a policy. It drives hundreds of millions of tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions reduction over the next couple of decades in official projections. It's also going to get very tight and constraining for some businesses over the next 10, 15 years. It's an important policy. It should be built on. One of the things that you've got to do, whoever takes the government benches at the next election, is to ensure that that policy doesn't cause a loss of competitiveness for industries that ought to have a very bright future in Australia, even in a net zero emissions world. And so this is businesses like in steel, in cement, aluminium, and a number of others that have got these very, very energy intensive characteristics. And so one of the things that we're putting forward is for the next government to take some decisions on a responsibly designed, cautiously implemented border adjustment mechanism for carbon. So this is comparable to the system that Europe is in the midst of putting in place. They've recently actually announced they're going to simplify that system in a few ways, as they should. We would have the opportunity to start much simpler than they initially designed theirs. The idea there is to ensure a level playing field within the Australian market for products like steel, so that there's no incentive to move production out of Australia just because of differences in policy on climate change here versus in India or China or other places. Although I know both India and China are introducing forms of carbon trading and carbon pricing for industry over the next couple of years. But not everybody is ever going to be in the safeguard mechanism. It is a demanding system. Lots of industry just would never be appropriate to go in. And so support from the federal government and collaboration with the states on supporting businesses to adopt clean process heat options, whether that is electrification or biomethane or hydrogen, that's going to be an important frontier for the next government.
And, you know, there's a lot, and we can talk more about this in the session on the industry paper, but this is tied up to industry support programs that are happening all around the world. We haven't really articulated exactly what we want other than just assisting businesses with that transition?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of announcements from the current government about support for development of new net zero aligned industries, like the green hydrogen industry or recently a fund for green iron. And those opportunities are important. Australia's current significant exports of thermal and metallurgical coal and natural gas will shrink in volume and in value as the world moves towards bumpily and unevenly towards net zero emissions. And we are going to need more strings to our bow to maintain prosperity. And so a world with less demand for coal is a world with more demand for clean energy, minerals that are essential for clean energy, and for products like steel or just pure iron to be made in a cleaner way. So we could have very large opportunity there. We need to do a few things to get that right, and that includes actually realising the advantage in clean electricity supply that we could have but don't have today. But alongside those expansion opportunities, we have a lot of industry in Australia already that we will still need in a net zero world, and their transition is also important. The ability to adopt cleaner process heat in particular, cleaner logistics, and to navigate an energy market that has changed a lot. Those things are going to be important. We can't forget about the vast bulk of the existing economy, even while we very properly try to bring the new frontiers of opportunity into that economy as well.
Now, there's a couple of items that we have in the industry paper, but we should probably discuss here because it makes sense. And this is the challenge always for AI Group, is which bucket do we fit which particular issue? And those two items are the environment approvals and circular economy and product stewardship. So environmental approvals, what do we say about that?
So this is closely tied to the energy system as well, because in order to build new industries and to supply them with the clean electricity and other inputs like biomethane that they will need, we're going to have to build a lot of stuff, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of wind farms and solar farms, a lot of big batteries, a lot of mines and processing facilities and new factories, just a lot of stuff. And Australia, like many other advanced economies, has become in recent decades a place where it is actually quite hard to build stuff. There are a lot of veto points. There's a lot of assessments to be done. And because of our federal system, often projects have to jump through two different sets of hoops for environmental approvals with different timelines, different variations on paperwork, often similar issues being considered. And so there has been an effort under the last two governments to streamline these approvals, and neither of those efforts has succeeded. And it is really important that the next government pick up the baton and find ways to work with the Parliament and stakeholders to get this done. And what that's going to involve, almost certainly, is national standards for environmental protection that states can be accredited through their own environmental regulators as acting consistently with, and then the Commonwealth can delegate its approvals to the same bodies in the states that are doing state approvals. And at least you'd have one touch point and one closely aligned set of standards being applied. Now, we haven't gotten there in the current Parliament. Everybody hates it from different reasons. People who want to build stuff, many of them are worried that the process will end up getting harder as a result of reform. People who want to see fossil export projects in particular not get built are loath to let go of any possible tool for throwing sand in the gears of those. And everybody needs to realise that if we don't improve this system, nobody's ambitions are going to be achieved.
And in my experience, no member has ever said to me, please let us have complex and multiple different ways for laws to apply across this country. Everyone wants one set of rules, one set of laws that everyone can agree to and work within. And I think, yes, this is, I agree, very controversial for many reasons, but I think really important to move.
Yeah.
And then the last one is the product stewardship. And this is a big challenge. And again, one of those micro things that perhaps doesn't get as much attention, but it's going to be really crucial for us to decarbonise the economy.
Yeah, that's right. And there's an awful lot of businesses that are caught up in circular economy issues, whether it's through their use of packaging for their products, and packaging produces the most visible, most publicly discussed environmental challenges today. Or if it's the products themselves, like the recovery of materials from electronic waste, which Australia produces more and more of. So the next government is going to need to conclude a process of a new product stewardship arrangement for packaging, and getting the details of that right is very important, including having a degree of predictability and viability for all the investments that will need to be made in the processing capacity and then the end uses of recovered materials from packaging. We've seen the collapse in the last couple of years of the Red Cycle initiative. These systems can be very brittle, and so that's going to be a major challenge. And then getting back to work on an e-waste scheme that's broader than the current TV and computer recycling scheme, which gets a lot of bycatch. Consumers don't really distinguish between one kind of electronic waste and another, and a system that has got better coverage is going to be able to work more efficiently.
And crucial to any product stewardship scheme or circular economy sort of process will be collaboration across the industry with major players, supply chain up and downstream, importers, etc. And I'm not really convinced that our legislation and the ACCC is actually equipped for that, to give companies that sort of confidence and safe harbour to have those conversations.
I agree with that. It is very tricky to try to combine the degree of collaboration within an industrial ecosystem that the circular economy requires with the systems that we've built up over many years for good reason to prevent anti-competitive conduct. And we just need to find a way to marry those two. We certainly don't want cartels, but also we don't want mountains of waste accumulating because the people who could produce it in better ways or use it in better ways can't properly talk to each other.
And it's another reminder that the 3 Ds, decarbonisation, diversification and digitalisation, have impacts across the economy, even the poor ACCC. And
yes,
how that will administer. All right, well, thanks very much, Tennant. So we wait for the election now. And for those listeners, you can read the papers. They'll be available on our website. And perhaps after the election, we might have another chat to see how we think some of these policy recommendations will track.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, Tennant.
Thanks, Louise.